Well, good day to you all. This is Pastor Chris coming to you here from Christ the King Lutheran in Escanaba, the second day in March. Wednesday, it's a beautiful, beautiful day outside. Hope you're enjoying the sunny weather. Getting ready for our fourth Sunday in the season of Lent. We come to a very, very famous parable, the parable of the prodigal son. So let me go ahead and read these passages from you. Luke chapter 15, verses 11 through 32. St. Luke writes, Jesus said there was a man who had two sons. The younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of the property that will belong to me. So he divided the property between them. A few days later, the younger son gathered all he had and traveled to a distant country, and there he squandered his property in dissolute living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed the pigs. He would gladly have filled himself with the pods that the pigs were eating, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, How many of my father's hired hands have bread enough and to spare, and here I am dying of hunger? I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven, and before you I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands. So he set off and went to his father. But while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. And then the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven, and before you I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his slaves, Quickly! Bring out a robe, the best one, and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet, and get the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For the son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to celebrate. Now his older son was in the field. He came and approached the house. He heard music and dancing. He called one of the slaves and asked what was going on. He replied, Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf because he has got him back safe and sound. Then he became angry and refused to go in. His father came out and began to plead with him. But he answered his father, Listen, for all these years I have been working like a slave for you, and I have never disobeyed your command, yet you have never given me even a young goat so that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came back who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him? Then the father said to him, Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice, because this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found. The Gospel of the Lord. So this parable is one of the longest parables that Jesus spoke to the disciples and those gathered around it, and it comes in chapter 15 of Luke's Gospel, which is all about being lost and being found. One with the chapter begins with the parable of the lost sheep, finding one sheep, leaving the 99 behind, something you wouldn't do, but that's the radical nature of God's grace and God's love. The parable of the lost coin, the woman turning the house over on end just to find the one coin that she had lost. And here, in a very personal example, Jesus gives in parable form about what it means to be lost and to be found, but also some of the dynamics that are at work when that happens. And so this parable, you notice there's three main figures. There's the father, and there are their two sons. The youngest son, we remember, is the most infamous one who wants all of his inheritance, which is basically saying to the father, your good is dead. And so very presumptuous of the son to say such a thing, but nevertheless the father acquiesces and gives him his inheritance before his time. And the youngest son goes and wastes all his money. As the older son says, he wasted it on prostitutes and dissolute living, so not using it very wisely. Then we've got the older son, excuse me, who is a bit perturbed at the recent turn of events. The younger son, who had wasted everything, all of a sudden has a party thrown for him, and you can hear in his words the complete unfairness of this. That his youngest son, his brother, the father's youngest son, didn't deserve this, and here he has been slaving away faithfully and his father doesn't even do anything special for him. And then we have the father, who is a very interesting character in the parable because he does some things that fathers don't necessarily do, at least in ancient Middle Eastern society. The father gives the inheritance before time, before it was his time, which is quite unusual. And then the father also, as the son, the youngest son, comes back, he runs out to him, and this is just absolutely absurd. A father doesn't do that, especially back in those days, and so that would have been shameful for a father to run out and do something like that. You're supposed to control your emotions, not to do that. But then the father also begs and pleads with the older son, and so this father is certainly wearing his heart on his sleeve. And so what are some themes that we can take with us this week? Well, there's a number of themes going on here as every week, but of course the most powerful and profound one is the depth and the power of forgiveness. We see this embodied in the youngest son, who goes and wastes it all and comes back and gets exactly what he doesn't deserve. Right? He deserves to be judged by his father. He deserved to be punished for acting so presumptuously against his own family, writing them off as dead and abandoning them. But here the father comes running out to him with open arms, almost before he has time to finish. He doesn't really confess that what he has done. He says that I've sinned against you, and the father just runs out to him. Just a very, very beautiful picture of God's divine love. And then we also have that picture of the oldest son who, this just isn't fair. That's kind of how God's grace is. It's about the parable. It's kind of like the parable of the laborers in the farm. Each one of them works a different shift, so to speak. They all work different times, but they all get paid the same, and that's the nature of God's forgiveness. It's for everyone, available for free if you would just receive it. And so this parable is very, very powerful on a number of levels. For those of us who feel the unfairness of things like that, we can identify with the older brother. For those of us who have forgiven generously, like the father, but also many of us who have, so to speak, sown wild oats, and finally we come to our senses and come back to God, kind of like the youngest son. So a number of things we can identify